Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving deep into some really practical and honestly fascinating source material. We're unpacking insights from a conversation about, well, navigating a challenge many of you might have run into. Nigerian bureaucracy.
Yeah, it's a big one.
It really is. Our source is basically a breakdown of a discussion focusing on tackling those common hurdles, like getting your NIN, applying for an e-passport, even renewing your driver's license over there.
Hmm.
So the mission for this deep dive is pretty straightforward. We want to pull out the most valuable nuggets of knowledge and strategy from this chat, but with a specific focus, something you might not immediately think of.
Right.
How emotional intelligence and those crucial soft skills can actually be your superpower in these processes that can often be, let's face it, pretty frustrating.
And what's really interesting about the source material here is how it frames these bureaucratic moments. It doesn't just paint them as, logistical problems or just paperwork. Instead, it really highlights them as situations where your interpersonal skills, how you actually connect with the people involved, are absolutely key to getting through them successfully. We're going to look at the specific techniques the source talks about and really dig into why they might actually work.
Exactly. It's about getting it done, yes, but doing it in a way that hopefully saves you time, energy, and maybe a bit of your sanity, too. Let's unpack the source material.
Okay.
So the source kicks off by highlighting the national identity number, the NIN. It really paints it as the absolute foundation. Essentially, you don't quite exist in the government system without it.
It's step one for everything else, basically.
Right. But getting it, according to the source, seems to demand a fair bit of patience and, crucially, that emotional intelligence we mentioned.
And this brings up a key question the source tackles.
Mm-hmm.
Why is emotional intelligence so vital right from this first hurdle? The source's point is pretty simple. The officials you're dealing with are, well, they're human beings having their own day. And how you approach them right at the start sets the whole tone. Walking in with what the source vividly calls wahala energy. That frustrated, maybe aggressive vibe.
Yeah, I can picture that.
It's almost guaranteed to just attract resistance. It puts people on the defensive immediately.
And the source offers an alternative, right? It suggests approaching with empathy, but also kind of calm, quiet authority. It even coins a term I quite like, compliance magnetism.
Yes. Compliance magnetism. I thought that was great. It's this core idea that your whole demeanor, your presence, can actually make people want to help you, or at least be less resistant. The source frames it as ethical influence. You're not trying to trick anyone. You're just making the interaction smoother through basic respect. And the specific techniques it mentions are so straightforward, but maybe easily forgotten.
Like what?
Things like speaking slowly, deliberately, making genuine eye contact, and trying to use the official's name if you can catch it, like in their example, "Good morning, Madam Ruth. I know today long for you." That's what clarifies something quick.
Okay, personalizing it a bit.
Exactly. The source calls this hypnotizing the moment with respect, which sounds dramatic, but it just means you're sort of pausing the usual rush and bringing a brief moment of calm, personal acknowledgement into the whole thing.
That actually makes a lot of sense. You're connecting on a human level first before you get down to the transaction itself. Okay, so building on that idea, preparation, foundational documents, the source then moves on to the e-passport process, which sounds like it adds another layer of complexity after the NIN.
Yeah, definitely. This is where the source really emphasizes that getting your NIN sorted is just, step one. The e-passport application absolutely depends on your NIN not just being active, but having the data exactly matching your passport details.
So the devil really is in the details there.
Absolutely critical detail. The source specifically warns about what it calls the one-letter delay syndrome, meaning even a single character difference, maybe a typo, between your NIN data and your passport application. It can lead to weeks, sometimes even months, of really frustrating delays. So the absolute key takeaway here is you have to meticulously cross-check all your documents before you even think about starting the application online.
Okay, noted. Triple check everything. And
Yeah.
the strategy doesn't just stop with the paperwork, does it? The source has some interesting advice about when you should physically go for appointments or submissions.
Right. It advises going really early, like often before the official opening time. It suggests there's this sort of unspoken thing it calls unofficial early bird priority.
Okay, so beat the rush.
Well, yes, but what's fascinating here isn't just about physically getting ahead in the queue, though that obviously helps. The source implies there's a social dimension too.
Mm.
Getting there early often means you're interacting with officials who are, fresher, maybe less stressed, haven't been ground down by the day's crowds yet. You're kind of leveraging the human energy cycle.
Interesting angle.
And the source even suggests using that waiting time to, connect with other people who are also waiting. A simple smile, maybe a brief chat with the person next to you.
Really? How does that help?
Well, the source notes that stranger might just happen to have a useful bit of info, or maybe even knows someone who works there, or just generally helps build a slightly less tense atmosphere. It's framed, again, as that ethical influence idea, building a little bit of human connection, however small, before you might even need to ask for anything.
So leveraging the human element, even among fellow applicants. Okay, and what about managing the inevitable frustration that comes with long waits and these often complex processes?
Very direct on this. Take deep breaths.
Yeah.
Seriously,
Mm.
the source offers a pretty powerful mantra for those moments. My composure is power.
My composure is power. I like that.
The insight there is that the second you lose your composure, you've basically given up control of the situation and your own reaction. And that rarely, if ever, leads to a good outcome in a bureaucratic setting, right?
Definitely not. Okay, that's a solid takeaway for loads of situations. Right, so after the NIN Foundation and the e-passport complexity, the source takes us to what it describes as potentially the toughest test, driver's license renewal.
Ah, yes, the driver's license saga. The source really describes this one as potentially testing your soul. It mentions common hurdles like ghost centers,
Ghost centers? What are those?
locations listed online that either, well, don't actually exist or aren't really functional for licensing when you get there.
Yeah.
Also, failed biometric machines and the absolute classic, OGA never come, meaning
Yeah.
senior person needed to sign off or handle something crucial just hasn't arrived yet.
Oh, man. Yeah, that sounds like a recipe for frustration, systemic unpredictability.
Exactly. But even with all that, the source does offer strategies. It emphasizes leaning back on those soft skills again.
Okay, so what does it suggest?
First, it advises trying to avoid middlemen if you can. Use the official FRSC portal, that's the Federal Road Safety Corps, the agency handling licenses. Use their portal to fill out the forms online yourself.
Yeah.
The source says this gives you a bit of an upper hand because you show up looking knowledgeable and prepared, which can sometimes, grease the wheels a little.
Makes sense. And when you face that classic bureaucratic wall, the come back tomorrow line, the source suggests this is a prime time to use soft power.
Precisely. It's not about arguing or begging, but about that subtle ethical influence based on respect and just calmly demonstrating genuine need. The example the source gives is quite simple, but effective. Instead of demanding service, you might say something like, I understand, sir. I'm just hoping to sort this today because I actually came all the way from Mention a Far Place. I really respect the work you do.
Acknowledging them while explaining your situation.
Exactly. The source labels this kind of interaction hypnotic, again, maybe a strong word, but the idea is it uses empathy and acknowledgement to potentially shift the official's perspective away from just dismissal without any confrontation.
It totally changes the dynamic, doesn't it? From a demand to a respectful request.
It really does. And the source strongly emphasizes that these soft skills, controlling your tone, showing patience, communicating respectfully, they are incredibly underrated strategies in this whole context.
Yeah.
The moment you resort to shouting or pulling rank with that phrase, do you know who I am?
Yeah, the classic.
According to the source, that is the exact moment you basically guarantee yourself a much longer, much more difficult process. It's just counterproductive energy.
So, pulling all this together, what does this source material really boil down to? What's the big picture takeaway from this deep dive into navigating, challenging bureaucracies like the Nigerian one?
I think the source material consistently points to the fact that success in these environments isn't only about having every single piece of paper perfectly in order, although obviously that's essential too. It's fundamentally about the human element. It's about blending that preparedness with emotional intelligence, with patience, and with strategic, respectful communication. The source kind of frames it like approaching each encounter as a mission. You prepare your documents, yeah, but you also prepare your energy, your mindset, your whole demeanor.
It really reinforces that idea that poise, that calm, respectful approach, can actually be way more effective than trying to wield perceived power or getting aggressive. Controlling your own tone can genuinely influence the outcome.
Absolutely. And, this raises a bigger question, doesn't it? Something for you listening to maybe think about as you go about your day. In what other areas of your life, beyond maybe the specific frustrations of bureaucracy, could consciously applying these same principles, empathy, keeping your composure, strategic, respectful communication, fundamentally change the outcome of a challenging interaction?
Mm,
The source material, really at its heart, encourages you not to leave your humanity or the humanity of the person you're dealing with at the door.
definitely something to think about until our next deep dive.